The base hospital pulsed like a living thing, a wounded heart of metal and light. Alarms wailed down sterile corridors, wheels rattled over tile, and voices rose above the hum of ventilators and the low moan of pain. The air was thick with the smell of iron and iodine, of fear and urgency. It was organized chaos, and within it, Nurse Aria Vance moved like calm water through fire. Her steps were sure, her hands steady. She adjusted IV lines, pressed gauze against bleeding wounds, whispered reassurances no one else had time to give. To the others, she was background noise efficient, silent, forgettable. The surgeons, draped in their confidence and titles, shouted orders over her head as though she were a piece of equipment that happened to respond. Get me vitals on bed 3. Someone clear that tray. No, not her, you, intern. Aria didn't flinch. She kept working. The young soldier on the cot before her had glass in his shoulder and terror in his eyes. She smiled, soft but unwavering. You're all right, Private. You're breathing, that's the hard part. He tried to thank her, but she'd already moved on to the next stretcher, her boots squeaking faintly on the polished floor. Then the doors burst open. A group of medics rushed in, their uniforms streaked with dust and blood. On the gurney between them lay a man whose chest was half-soaked crimson a colonel his insignia darkened with grime, eyes half-closed, breath rattling. Multiple shrapnel wounds, one of the medics panted. He's crashing. Dr. Mallory swept in like a storm, tall, confident, the kind of man who wore authority like armor. He barked orders, his voice cutting through the noise. Prep for thoracotomy. Get me suction. Get me 2 units of O-neg and... He caught sight of Aria at the head of the bed, already stabilizing the oxygen line. His expression twisted. You. Step back. Vitals are dropping fast, Aria said quietly, eyes on the monitor. He needs pressure on the left side. If that fragment... I said step back, Mallory snapped, his gloved hand slicing the air like a blade. You're just a nurse. Let the professionals handle this. The room went still for a heartbeat long enough for humiliation to hang in the air like smoke. The other staff shifted awkwardly. Aria didn't argue. She didn't even blink. She simply set the oxygen mask securely over the colonel's face and moved aside. But her eyes never left the man's chest. She'd seen that pattern of bleeding before, not here, not under bright lights and clean instruments, but out in the mud and chaos of the front lines. She'd seen what happened when surgeons ignored the rhythm of a faltering pulse because they trusted the textbook more than instinct. Mallory leaned over the patient, giving clipped orders, unaware of the flicker of warning in Aria's gaze. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the tray, a silent war between training and memory raging behind her calm face. No one here knew who she used to be. Combat medic, 9th Recon Division, the one who crawled through mortar fire to pull men from wreckage. The one who had done field surgery by flashlight and prayer. The one who had been decorated, then quietly reassigned after she refused to let rank decide who lived or died. To them, she was just Nurse Vance, the quiet one who followed instructions and stayed invisible. Mallory's tone cut through her thoughts. Clamp. Suction. Now, keep that artery isolated. A nurse hesitated. A scalpel clattered onto a tray. The colonel's heart monitor beeped irregularly once, twice a flutter of panic in electronic form. Mallory swore under his breath, adjusting his grip. He's bleeding out. I need that clamp. Aria's voice rose, calm but firm. Doctor, you're losing pressure on the left. The fragments shifted. He shot her a glare sharp enough to wound. I told you to stay silent. The silence that followed was deafening. Aria stood still, the fluorescent light glinting off her name badge, her expression unreadable. She could feel the weight of every eye in the room waiting, measuring. Inside, though, something colder stirred. A memory of another man on another table, her hands covered in his blood, the sound of his heartbeat fading because she'd obeyed an order instead of her own knowledge. Never again. She swallowed, forced her voice into stillness, and turned away to ready a tray of instruments that might save him when Mallory finally realized his mistake. And as the monitor began to scream its warning tone, Arya Vance stood motionless in the corner, her jaw clenched, her mind already knowing how this would end not with authority, but with truth. She'd heard those words before, asterisk, she's just a nurse, asterisk. But this time, she knew something they didn't asterisk asterisk, that being just a nurse could mean being the only one who still knew how to save a life. The operation room pulsed with chaos, disguised as order, a battlefield without bullets, only metal instruments gleaming like small, precise weapons. The fluorescent lights glared down, too bright, too cold, illuminating every drop of blood that slicked the colonel's chest. Monitors screamed in erratic rhythm, their shrill beeps colliding with shouted orders and the hiss of oxygen. The sterile air stank of iron, sweat, and fear. Dr. Mallory stood over the table, his movements quick and confident, his voice sharp enough to slice through the room. Retractor, suction, clamp now. His assistants scrambled to keep up, passing tools that clinked against trays, metal against metal. The colonel's blood pooled dark and thick beneath the drapes, spreading slowly, deliberately, like time itself was running out. And in the corner, Arya Vance watched. Her gloved hands were steady, her breath measured, but her mind was anything but still. Something was wrong. The numbers on the monitor told one story, but the man's breathing, the shallow, uneven drag of air between lips turning gray, told another. She'd seen this before. Not in a hospital, not under clean light, but in the dirt and smoke of a war zone, under the hum of choppers and the rain of fire. Her throat tightened. Doctor. The artery. Mallory didn't even look up. I said stand by. His tone cracked like a whip. The younger nurses froze, afraid to meet Arya's eyes. She stepped back, the soles of her boots whispering against tile, but her jaw locked tight. Her gaze stayed fixed on the patient. The colonel's pulse fluttered on the screen, one sharp spike, then a long valley of silence. The rhythm was off. The pattern too familiar. A memory surged up before she could push it away. Night, the stench of burning oil and mud. A soldier's body in her lap, his heartbeat faint against her palms. No surgeon, no lights. Just her and a combat knife she'd sterilized with fire. She could still feel the rain on her face, cold and sticky with ash. Stay with me, she'd whispered then. And the soldier had because she hadn't waited for permission to act. Back in the present, Arya's pulse quickened. The same sound, that fluttering, fading beat, echoed from the monitor again. Doctor, his pressures crashing. More suction, Mallory snapped, his tone clipped, impatient. He's losing blood from the right. No, she whispered, too softly for most to hear. It's not the right side. She could see it, the faint swelling just beneath the left rib cage, the unnatural tension that meant internal bleed. She knew where it was. She could almost feel it beneath her fingertips. But Mallory didn't notice. His focus was on the incision, not the body. He was fighting anatomy, she was reading it. Her hands itched to move. Every muscle screamed for her to act, to correct his angle, to shift the clamp before it was too late. But rules weighed heavier than instinct here. And in this room, rank spoke louder than truth. The colonel's breathing hitched. His body jerked once, faintly, like something deep inside him had given up. Arya's pulse thundered in her ears. She couldn't stop herself now. Dr. Mallory, she said, louder this time, firm enough to draw glances. You're clamping the wrong. His head snapped toward her, eyes sharp behind his mask. One more word, and you're out of this room. Her mouth closed. Silence followed. The only sound was the mechanical gasp of the ventilator and the high, thin whine of a monitor stretching into danger. Arya looked at the colonel's face, pale, unrecognizable under the mask, and saw not an officer, not a patient, but every soldier she'd ever fought to save. Her hands twitched again, desperate to move. The smell of burnt flesh and diesel from her memories mixed with the sterile scent of antiseptic. Her mind blurred the present with the past. She could hear gunfire and the hiss of oxygen. The clatter of instruments became the sound of a rifle chamber snapping shut. And Mallory's voice, sharp and dismissive, became the echo of another officer years ago who told her she was just a medic. He died before he could finish the sentence. The colonel's heartbeat stuttered again. One long, empty pause. Arya's chest burned. She took a step forward, and this time, no one stopped her. The other nurses looked between her and the surgeon, uncertain, afraid. The air grew heavy, thick with something that wasn't authority but inevitability. Mallory muttered, "We're losing him." His voice lower now, less certain. Arya's eyes hardened. "You already have," she whispered, not in anger, but in grief. The lights above flickered once, as if the room itself held its breath. She knew what would happen next. The collapse. The realization. The silence before the storm broke. Because when the next heartbeat failed to come when the room erupted into motion again, it wouldn't be Dr. Mallory who saved him. It would be the woman he'd told to stand by. The monitor's flatline scream sliced through the room like a blade. The colonel's chest stilled beneath the surgical lights, the rhythmic rise and fall gone. Panic rippled through the team. Mallory barked orders too many, too fast, his voice cracking under the pressure. Suction, compress, someone find the bleed. The nurses moved frantically, their hands trembling. The metallic scent of blood mixed with the sterile air, creating a haze of heat and fear that wrapped around them all. Arya didn't hear him anymore. The noise fell away, replaced by the steady thud of her own heartbeat in her ears. Her eyes locked on the wound, tracing the subtle twitch beneath the skin, that faint, uneven pulse trying to fight its way back. She knew it. Every instinct screamed what to do. Every second wasted was another breath lost. She moved before she could think, before the fear could stop her. Her hand shot out, seizing the scalpel from the tray. One clean motion, precise, confident, absolute. Metal flashed beneath the lights, and the world seemed to hold its breath. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Mallory shouted, spinning toward her. But the incision was already made, deliberate and small, exactly where it needed to be. Blood welled up, but not uncontrolled, purposeful. Arya's fingers pressed into the tissue, guiding the clamp into place with the unshakable certainty of someone who'd done this 100 times before, though never in this kind of room. "Get me suction here," she said, her tone sharp but calm. It wasn't a request, it was command. The nurse nearest her hesitated, then obeyed. The suction roared to life, clearing the field. A thin stream of blood gave way to the flash of metal. Arya's eyes narrowed. There. With one movement, she fished the shard of shrapnel free no bigger than a coin and dropped it into a steel tray with a ringing Times clink. Asterisk. The monitor beeped once, then again. Mallory froze. His anger faltered as the line steadied into rhythm, weak but consistent. The colonel's chest lifted slightly beneath the oxygen mask. Then came the sound, a gasp, shallow but real. The soldier's eyelids fluttered, his mouth opened, cracked lips forming words that came out rough and fragile. "She," his voice broke, then steadied with effort. "She saved me once." The room went still. You don't know who she is." Mallory blinked, confusion flickering across his face. The nurses looked from him to Arya, their expressions caught between disbelief and awe. The colonel's gaze, glassy but aware, found her face through the mask of pain. There was recognition there, not of her uniform, but of something deeper. Memory, gratitude. Mallory turned toward her slowly, eyes dropping to the small metal tag pinned above her chest pocket. For the first time, he really read it. Asterisk asterisk Arya Vance. Asterisk asterisk. His brow furrowed. the name pulling at a half-forgotten thread of rumor and legend that had floated through military medical circles for years. And then it hit him. Vance, he murmured, voice cracking. Asterisk, the Times, Vance. The nurses froze. Even the machines seemed to quiet, the steady pulse of the monitor now the only sound in the room. Mallory stared, disbelief giving way to something that looked almost like shame. The stories had seemed like myths tales told over cigarettes and late-night shifts about a combat medic who'd done the impossible. The woman who dragged 3 men out of a burning convoy while bullets tore the air apart. The one who refused evacuation until every last soldier was pulled from the wreckage. The one who disappeared after the war, swallowed by bureaucracy and silence. They called her the ghost medic. Asterisk. Mallory's voice trembled. That was, you? Arya didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her eyes were steady, her hands still pressing gauze where the incision bled faintly. He's stable, she said simply. You can close now, doctor. But Mallory couldn't move. He looked down at the man who had nearly died under his care, and at the woman who had saved him without hesitation, without permission, without recognition. The colonel's breathing steadied, his chest rising stronger now, the color slowly returning to his face. One of the younger nurses covered her mouth, eyes wide with tears. Another whispered, she really was there. The convoy attack. Arya peeled off her gloves quietly, blood streaking her forearms in thin red lines. The surgical lights glared against her calm expression, the kind of calm born not of detachment, but of experience, hard, painful, earned. She met Mallory's gaze, and for the first time he looked small beneath his title. Next time, she said softly, don't measure worth by the rank on the uniform. No one spoke. The room, moments ago a storm of sound and chaos, now hung in reverent silence. The colonel's weak smile lingered as he slipped into steady sleep, alive because of her. And as Arya turned away, the whisper that had changed everything still echoed in the room like a heartbeat reborn. Asterisk. You don't know who she is. Asterisk. By morning, the story had already outgrown the walls of the surgical wing. It moved through the base the way wind moves through an open field, quiet at first, then unstoppable. In the mess hall, in the barracks, in the mechanic sheds where engines roared and oil burned, they whispered it. The tale of the nurse who took the scalpel from a surgeon's hand and brought a dying colonel back from the edge. The one the doctor had dismissed as asterisk, just a nurse. Asterisk, some swore they'd seen it happen. Others thought it had to be rumor, another miracle war story spun from exhaustion and adrenaline. But by sunrise, everyone knew her name. Arya Vance. The woman who'd done the impossible, again. Inside the hospital, Arya stood at the same sink she'd used 100 times before, scrubbing the same blood-stained instruments, the warm water stinging her tired hands. Her reflection stared back from the stainless steel weary eyes, hair pulled back, the faint shadow of a night that had refused to end. There was no triumph in her face. Only relief that the colonel was breathing. She dried her hands, straightened her scrubs, and went back to her rounds as if nothing extraordinary had happened. When the door creaked open, she didn't have to look to know who it was. Dr. Mallory's voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. Nurse Vance. She turned, offering the same calm nod she always did. Doctor. He hesitated by the doorway, hands shoved into the pockets of his white coat. The authority he carried so easily before now hung awkwardly, like a uniform that no longer fit. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then the words came out, unsteady but sincere. I was wrong, he said. About you, about a lot of things. Arya's expression didn't change. She wiped down the counter, her movements precise, methodical. You weren't wrong about me being a nurse, she said softly. That's exactly what I am. Mallory's brow furrowed. You saved that man's life. I nearly lost him because I didn't listen. She finally looked at him, eyes calm but piercing. A title doesn't make you capable, Doctor, she said. Action does. The words landed with the weight of truth. Not angry, not proud, simply times true. Asterisk Mallory nodded once, slowly, as if he'd been handed a lesson he didn't deserve but would never forget. I won't forget that, he said quietly. I hope not, she replied. Then she turned back to her work. Outside, the day had begun to break open sunlight cutting through the morning fog that lingered over the base. Arya stepped out into the crisp air, her shift finally over. Across the courtyard, soldiers paused when they saw her. Some nodded. Others simply watched in silence. It wasn't the kind of attention she wanted, but it wasn't mockery anymore. It was something heavier times respect. Asterisk. Near the infirmary gate, a figure stood at attention. The colonel she'd saved. His chest was bandaged, his face pale but steady. He leaned on a cane, still weak, but his spine was straight. When she approached, he lifted a trembling hand to his forehead and saluted her. Not the stiff salute of duty, but one born of reverence. She froze, caught off guard. Sir, she began, shaking her head, that's not necessary. It is, he said, his voice rough but certain. You carried me through death twice, Vance. Once out there, he nodded toward the distant horizon, where the desert met the sky, and once in there. He gestured back toward the hospital. That makes you my commanding officer in every way that matters. Arya's lips parted, but no words came. The moment stretched between them, raw, human, unguarded. Then she simply nodded. Just doing my job, Colonel. He smiled faintly. Then God help anyone who underestimates that job again. As she walked away, the murmurs followed, quiet, reverent, a ripple of acknowledgement spreading like light across the base. They'd all heard what she'd done, but seeing her like this unassuming, still moving with that same quiet purpose, made it something else entirely. Arya paused by the gate, the wind tugging gently at her hair. Beyond the fence, the morning sun climbed higher, painting the sky in gold. She thought of the soldiers she'd saved, and the ones she couldn't, of the ones who had once laughed at her title, who now watched her in silence. True strength, she knew, never needed to shout. It didn't demand recognition or wear rank like armor. It simply endured steady, patient, and unyielding. It was the quiet courage that showed up when everyone else hesitated. As she walked toward the barracks, her figure bathed in the early light, someone behind her whispered, almost in awe, "That's her." And for the first time, Arya allowed herself the smallest smile. Not of pride, but of peace. Because she didn't need the legend they were building. She already knew who she was.